Episode 521. We are getting up there. Episode 521, Sold Not For Sale podcast. We got Joe Rogan and Tim Dillion. And Tim Dillion goes on a rant that made me go down a very interesting rabbit hole of thought. And I want to hear what you guys think of it as well. And then also, it's just, he talks about the time that we live in and how so many things, even just in the past 5 years, how many things have happened to us? Even if you think about just 2012 to now, how many things have happened that mold the way you think and are going to dictate the way you act or the way you think about certain institutions going forward, And then it made me think of, what are people in the future, the children of today, what are they going to be like when they're adults with all the things that they go through? And then the adults of the past, and how much is lost from them to us and then from us to them. Really makes me think about that. But I'm going to play the clip first. Before I do, of course, I have to bring you to IamCoachColin.com. Check it out if you have not already. We got all sorts of great anti-establishment wear for you. We have my personal favorite, the Public Enemy #1 shirt. The man himself who wants you to eat the bugs and own nothing, be happy. We have the certified pure blood shirt for those of you that survived the pandemic unscathed. We have the Great Resist shirt for those of you that would rather join the Great Resist instead of joining the Great Reset. Those of you who want to be self-sufficient, do not want to have to switch over to electric cars because you were told to, and want to be able to travel as far from your house as you see fit. And also, of course, the one that started it all, the Sold Not For Sale shirt. Beautiful, my absolute favorite. Now, all of that can be found on IamCoachColin.com. If you want 10% off, here you go. This is all you got to do. No emails, nothing attached. I am Coach Colin in the discount code. That gets you 10% off. Big purchase, small purchase. Now, remember, when you put it in, it is all capital letters. It is all one word, and there's one L in the name Colin, and that gets you 10% off of anything you just saw and more. And if you've done that with our site already, please let me thank you right now. You are much appreciated. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Now let's get into this clip.
Like two dudes that you live during a time. That's what's interesting. It's like, about all the other times, but you live in one particular time, and you might experience, there's a lot of things that happen in the span of any lifetime for as long as it is, But the way I think now versus even the way I thought 4 years ago has changed dramatically, right? Because so much happened in that period of time. So many new, ways to think about things. So many new weird things happen that you were like, oh, the things that you thought were impossible became possible.
Yeah.
The horror movie scenarios in your head that you had cooked up became reality.
Right.
Right? All these things. So, it's definitely weird that there are people that, never lived during this time and had no idea that any of the things that we went through were even really possible. And then kids, people will forget about it. Like people that were 2 during the pandemic might always trust the government because they never lived through this time of massive government overreach and really sloppy science and private and public fuckery, this weird unity between the private and the public sector and it's large profit-making institutions and all this stuff. So if you didn't live through it, you'll never appreciate it for how wild it was and how insane it was.
Do you know that there is a lot of people that are saying that their children have impaired speech because during the pandemic, they made them wear masks all the time?
Interesting.
There's even if it's a certain percentage of the time when you're talking to someone, when you're a child, apparently, we should Google this to make sure it's true, but I believe what they think is that as you're talking to someone and you're reading their lips, there's a thing going on where you see their expression and you get to read faces.
Wow.
And you get to learn how to read people. And that this is a very critical part of development when you're a child.
For sure.
And if you're exposed to even a small percentage, I would imagine, of your interactions or with people with shielded faces, you're not going to get any data from that. You're going to get this weird thing Masks can be detrimental to baby speech and language development. The good news is parents can take action to compensate. Well, I hope that's true. I hope you can compensate. My fear would be that there's certain stages where babies learn things, where, you know, they're sort of developmental stages. And if that's one of them, where like when they're really learning how to form their first words and have conversations with parents, that they're not seeing mouths and not seeing faces. That seems...
It's crazy.
And now that we find out that it didn't work, the whole thing is so insane. There was a study recently, see if you can find this, because we brought this up the other day, but we never Googled it, that wearing an N95 mask, you should never wear one for more than an hour a day.
Yeah. Well, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's going to come out now that'll be the complete opposite of what we were told to do.
Yeah, there's apparently some other health risks that can come from wearing one of those.
Of course.
All the time. Especially, I would imagine if it's hot out.
Yeah.
You're spitting into this fucking
thing. I
thing.
mean, just like breath. I remember during, you know, this whole thing, you had all those TikTok kids get really famous in LA, and like, it's amazing that TikTok, which is an app, right, started by China, the people that started this app were very open about what they were going to do. They were like, we're going to take 20 kids, make them famous, make them icons, because we think in the early stages of any social media app, having majorly famous people on it brings more people into it, right?
Right.
So these kids that were just running around LA got famous because somewhere in a room in like Shanghai or Beijing or whatever, they were choosing who would play to America, like that Charli D'Amelio girl's like you know, like the girl next door with brown hair and brown eyes. And they're just like, okay, we're going to make all these people famous. Like, this is a real interesting period of time to have lived through, where like, while you have all this government overreach and stuff like that, you have this landscape that's being completely curated in ways you don't know about. You don't understand what's happening because like people are being chosen, you know, in rooms in China to be famous. And like, you know, nobody knew, you know, about, you know, Anthony Fauci really until he became like the czar of public health. Right? Some people in the government knew who he was. It was just a weird time. It's a strange time where a lot of things were changing and all of the technology had, you know, and then they were like, wait a minute, is this good? Is it good that we have this app that China has access to all of this information, right? That we have. And like, so that was a huge thing during the pandemic too. TikTok exploded during the pandemic. It's very interesting. All these things that happen in that period of time are interesting things.
They're all interesting things.
They're all interesting things.
Yeah, it's a new sort of era of human beings, like a totally new chapter.
Yeah.
Like a weird chapter where nobody trusts the government, nobody trusts the media, nobody trusts... There's a lot of people that don't trust election machines, they don't trust politicians, they don't trust congresspeople, they don't trust the cops.
Nobody trusts anything.
And it's also, we're like at the verge. We're about like how many years away from being able to read minds?
Right.
How many years do we have before we're plugged into something? And
I don't know. Most people's minds I don't want to read.
Do you know?
Tim Dillon, yes, I agree with that. I don't want to read most people's minds. Not because like I don't want to know what's in there. It's because, you know, privacy. You shouldn't have the access to do that. That's just my thought process on it. But that clip, it made me think a lot. Like even when he talks about, you know, things are being curated in a way that are in structured in a way that you don't know about. And it's funny because when he brings up TikTok, we're talking about young kids, right? And that's why it's so important, I think, to like pass on as funny as it sounds or bad as it sounds, pass on the bad things that have happened. You know, because if you were a 12-year-old kid and you had a parent that was 40 years old, let's say 45, you know, if that parent understood, and I guess it goes to what he's saying, the things that you don't know about, but if that parent understood that hip hop and rock and roll, those people were chosen, like it was organic at the beginning, but there were some people that were chosen to socially engineer certain things. For the prison industrial complex, for the anti-war movement in the 60s, you know, when I talk about like Laurel Canyon, and the formation of hip hop was made to almost brainwash a certain generation of young people into thinking that violent, wild behavior was the way to go. I mean, doing it in song is it's a real serious way to ingrain it into somebody. Long form songs. If that person who's 45 understood that, they could easily turn to this 12-year-old and say, hey, I know you like these people who are on this screen who are playing these 5-second clips or whatever, what have you. But just so you know, Like a lot of times people get chosen to get put into these positions of fame, and you know, maybe you don't know exactly what to tell them, but you have to tell them like, hey, these people are chosen. You know, if you could remember what happened in the past, you know, these people are chosen. This is happening for a reason. You don't really want to get sucked into this. These probably aren't the people to follow. This is not really happening organically. This is not a girl to look up to. These are not like young boys to look up to. It just makes you think like it's, you know, like it's hard when we're talking about kids, but when we're talking about like you and I, we're older. And it's almost like if something is happening in front of you, you should question whether or not it's happened behind you, before you, years ago, decades ago, generations ago. You know, if they've lied before, maybe they're lying to me now. If music was used to social engineer certain outcomes in society, then maybe it's happening now. Maybe they don't use music now. Maybe they use social media. You know, if I shouldn't trust a news anchor, maybe I shouldn't trust this news outlet that's just popped up out of nowhere just because it's YouTube. Maybe they used to use, you know, CNN, NBC, ABC. Maybe they used to use stuff like that, 6 o'clock news. Maybe they just use, you know, insert whatever outlet you're thinking of right now. You know, any news outlet that's popped up. Maybe they use these people now. I don't know. It's just an interesting thought process to think about. Like if you think about people from the 1900s, like let's just say early 18, or let's say late 1800s, you know, there's certain things that they went through that if we took those lessons to heart, or let's say our grandparents, great-grandparents took those lessons to heart and kept passing on along those lessons, we would be more prepared for what happened in the past 5 years. Go back even further, you know, you'd be prepared to an extent, like if we really took on what the founding fathers really meant when they made the Constitution and what they really thought America was supposed to be and what it was supposed to stand for. If you really took that to heart, then as soon as what happened in the past 5 years happened, you'd have a protocol for what to do. You know, you'd know exactly what you're supposed to do. I'm just saying, like, I don't know, like the lessons that we go through today, you know, when he's talking about a 2-year-old, we've experienced government overreach. So maybe the best thing for us to do to those 2-year-olds is when they get older is you tell them the time of government overreach. You know, how beneficial would it be if you had family that grew all of their food, they had cattle, they were self-sufficient, if they passed all of that on to you, and you didn't decide, I'll just go to the grocery store. You like really took it to heart, you know? Because the reason that they were so self-sufficient is because they understood that there was no one else they could depend on, you know? Whereas now we're in a place where it's like, no, I can depend on the grocery store. I can depend on Amazon. I can depend on all of these different comforts and conveniences, you know? And even now we're starting to learn, as what happened the past 4 or 5 years. We're like, oh, I can't always depend on the grocery store. Like I remember that 2 weeks where I went to go get meat at the grocery store and there was no meat. I remember that. I don't know about you. I remember stuff like that. So maybe I should learn how to do this on my own. There wasn't a lot of produce. Maybe I should learn to grow my own food. We're starting to all of a sudden remember self-sufficiency is a thing, but I don't know. I guess we didn't have to lose. We didn't have to lose those lessons. Like we lost it and we had to relearn it via what we went through in the past 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, whatever. You know, it's like these coming up generations shouldn't have to lose what we've gone through and then go through it again. We should just pass it on properly. And not just pass it on like, hey, you shouldn't trust the government. Pass it on like, hey, this is what happened. XYZ is what happened. This is how they did it. This is what they did. You got to watch out for that. Please watch out for that. You know? I don't know. Like my example is like the one time I had my parents in the same room. I've never seen them in the same room before. It was one time. It was when my dad was in the hospital. And the one thing that they could agree on was that the government shouldn't always be trusted. It wasn't like complete anti-government, because I'm not anti-government. But they were both like, you can't always trust them. You gotta question things. And they were both very adamant about that. And I was like, oh, okay. And I took that to heart, because my dad had gone through something with the medical industry. My mom's single mother, she's felt it time and time again with how hard the world is when you're a single mother. So both of them were like, you can't always depend on the government. You can't always just trust them blindly. And now I don't. And I question things. And now I'm going to have their example and my example for what's happened in the past 5, 6, 7 years, whatever. And I'm going to pass that to my kids. I don't know. It's just weird to think about. Like, if right now you tried to explain to a kid who has gone through the indoctrination of elementary school with all these woke, wacky teachers, and now they're like in high school and like almost their final year, and you tried to explain to them that, hey, just so you understand, tolerance isn't the best thing to have all the time. Like, at a certain point, you have to not have tolerance with certain things because those are boundaries. You have to have certain boundaries set up in your life of things that you won't accept. They would look at you and be like, no, that's not how things work. They would be like, you have to be tolerant of everybody all the time, all people. And anything that opposes that would be considered racist, misogynistic, sexist, bigotry. And it would be hard to get that out of them. But you see some kids that aren't like that, and it's because their parents have passed on certain values. They make sure to pass on these values. Just makes you think, you know, because we are living through an interesting time, but there have been so many other interesting times, and it's like we forget. You know, people talk about the Great Depression, but they don't feel it. Just like Tim was talking about, you don't actually live through it. But we should remember, like, what happened? What happened? We've seen places succumb to communism, and we know about that, but we didn't live through it. But we should look back and go, what happened? What actually happened? What were the steps that were taken to get to that terrible place? How do we avoid those steps? You know? How do we avoid a Great Depression? Or how do we be prepared if another one came about? And we kind of just sit around, you know, not everybody, but a large percentage of people sit around and act like nothing like that could ever happen again. You know? And it would be such a mistake to sit around and act like the past 5, 6 years couldn't happen again. It'd be such a mistake. And it'd be such a mistake to not teach that to your kids. You know, that's the reason why I think that they try to destroy history all the time. It's because if you look back far enough, you'll have a blueprint of everything you need to do to be self-sufficient, to protect yourself, to protect your liberty, to protect your freedom of speech. You'll have a whole blueprint of things to do. So you don't have to depend on anyone. So you can be a real self-sufficient, informed, sovereign citizen. You know? I don't know. Anyways, guys, like the video if you haven't liked it already. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. And let me know what you think in the comment section about this whole thing. What are some lessons that you've learned? I have some people, no offense, but I have some older people who watch this stuff. Let me know some things that you've gone through that we can learn from. I really should set something up on a website or something so I could save this stuff. But let me know in the comment section. What are things that you've gone through that we could learn from, that we should be passing on, that we should be taking to heart and passing on to the next generation so people don't forget? I think that's valuable to do. And do that with your own people. If you have some older people around, find out some stuff. Because I'm positive there's a well of knowledge that shouldn't die with them. It should be passed on to you, and you should pass it on and add on everything that you've gone through as well. Anyways, guys, other than that, I am out.